The first migration were the Spanish, Portuguese Jews in the 18th century. And the most famous person we know is Lopes, who came from Newport, who probably visited New Bedford here. He owned a fleet of ships, and he also was interested in candle making. So he probably knew of New Bedford and came here to learn more about the art of candle making. The second migration of Jews came in the 19th century, and they were the German Jews. And we know about them because when there was enough Jews in the area, the B'nai Israel Society, they purchased a cemetery from the B'nai Israel Society, and that cemetery was the first cemetery, Jewish cemetery in New Bedford. It's in the middle of a Catholic cemetery on Mount Pleasant Street next to Ashley Ford. And that was the cemetery for the Jews till the end of the 19th century. And the third migration were the Eastern European Jews who came to New Bedford from 1877 on. And those are the Jews that we know of today, who eventually lived in the South End, the North End, and then when they had enough money, they moved west towards Dartmouth. At that time, I believe it was very important to the Jews to keep up traditions and everything, and when there was enough Jews in the South End to have a minyan, which is a quorum of 10 Jews, they could have a service. And before they had a synagogue, they would go into people's homes to pray. The first synagogue was actually incorporated in 1893, and they would raise money and everything. And in 1898, that first synagogue was built, which was Ahavath Achim, or as the Jews know it today, Ahavath Achim.
The synagogue was formally opened in 1898, and the cornerstone was bathed in wine, indicating joy. Corn was thrown on it, indicating plenty, and oil was poured on it, representing refreshments. The symbolism of wine, corn, and oil is found in the second paragraph of an ancient prayer. In this prayer, God promises Israel the blessings of prosperity and bountiful crops. The same blessing is bestowed upon the new synagogue.
Ahavath Achim was on Howland Street, Howland Street and 2nd Street. It's no longer there today. It's the site of the Gomes School today, and that was the site of our first synagogue.
A lot of these Jews came from Eastern Europe, and they came from different cities, or they call towns, and friends from these towns settled in the South End, and they started to settle in the South End primarily, and they were mostly all Orthodox Jews that spoke Yiddish, and that's why they started in the South End.
Water Street was a big commercial hub for the Jewish community. For many years, people told me before I came to town here, but that was a commercial hub. Thursday nights, getting ready for the Sabbath, shopping and all that. And the restaurant, the delicatessen, the kosher restaurant, the kosher delicatessens, the butcher shops, the mom and pop shops, all the places that were there. I mean, that slaughterhouses here in the city, they saw their own meat here.
Oh, they had dry goods stores, dress shops, furniture stores. That's where Kaplan Furniture was. And that's where a lot of these retail clothing stores were. And there was hat making.
Siemens Delicatessen.
That's when we get further north, Siemens Delicatessen, which was real delicatessen. Then there was a Sloan's Delicatessen. Then there was Crowdford Bakery there. And then they had like a mini slaughterhouse there for the killing of the chickens for ritual. And then actually they had chicken dealers there also, and fruit dealers.
It's a detective store to find documents, and you find it here and there. People didn't, but thank God you find things. And it shows me, my generation and subsequent generations, what these immigrant Jews attempted to do. They attempted to recreate in New Bedford the life that existed in the shtetl, the town they came from, which is basically a cradle-to-grave society. They would help each other out from the cradle to the grave. There was a house in the South End that took care of the people who were traveling through. Then go to a hotel. First, I had to eat kosher food. They'd stay there, no charge. People would cook for them and make sure. People invite them to the homes to eat, home hospitality. They had an interest-free loan society to help people start a business, or buy a wagon, no pedal, interest-free loan society. They had a society to help the bride get married. Made sure if people can afford it, made sure that had a nice reception, and the people played music, volunteered their services, played nice Jewish music. So all these functions. God, when someone passed away, there was no potter's field. People have told me stories to this day when I visit them. To recently, elderly people remember, unfortunately, their parent passed away during the difficult times. They used to cry when they told them. But known here, but the sacred society would come and say, "Don't worry, we're here. Everything will be done properly. You know, no difference. We have, and there was in New Bedford a sacred society, a men's division and a women's division, both in the South End Synagogue, Chesed Shalemis, in the North End Chesed Shalemis, and the Ahavath Achim. They took care of preparing the bodies. They didn't have a Jewish funeral home. It had the Freights funeral home. The South was called the Freights funeral home on Washington Square there, and they would use their facility. They would prepare the body, and then have the funeral. And the North End had a parallel community. So they had everything was taken care of by the Jewish community themselves. They recreated here at the existing town they came from. They helped each other out. I have documents which tell me annually, they had dinners annually, they raised money for the Jews who didn't come to America, who remained back in the shtetl, in the town, send money back there. Or for those Jews who went to Palestine then, send money to them, help them out. These are immigrants, these are poor Jews. These are peddlers coming to America, trying to eke out a living for themselves, knew their responsibility to help the Jews who remained in Lithuania or who went on to Palestine. It was a remarkable feat they did, a remarkable legacy they leave us to read these documents. And I thank God, I'm privileged I found these documents and to translate them from the Hebrew into English. And I've made a number of presentations at the Ahavath Achim Synagogue over the years, at Shabbat dinners, where I've discussed these issues with people and explained to people what these Jews did, these immigrant Jews who came here 120 plus years ago.
97-year-old Stanley Goldstein attended the synagogue on Howland Street until the new synagogue was built. Born on South First Street in New Bedford, Goldstein and his family moved to Bliss Corner in Dartmouth when he was approximately 6 years old. Despite the move, the family continued to walk to Howland Street for services.
I can remember the building had the entrance had two areas for men and women. In the traditional Orthodox synagogue, men and women were separated, and it was a two-story building. Women were upstairs and the men downstairs.
An Orthodox Jew eats certain food and follows certain rituals, and also, if he's really Orthodox, he has prayers for everything he does, from when he eats, when he goes to bed, when he goes to the bathroom. They all have certain prayers that they follow, and they're very strict, and that's the way they are called, real Orthodox, strict Jews.
There was a little chapel in the downstairs, and when we went for Passover or for Yom Kippur, which was a full-day service, I used to bring a little bag and go down in the cellar and eat a little lunch. And my father would there were two drugstores. I think one was on County, and he would go and prepay that I could go up there and have a milkshake and a little snack.
The first rabbi to come here was a man called Rabbi Aaron Harris Silverblatt. And he came here in 1895 from Lithuania by way of England. Many of the Jews who came to this community came from Lithuania around the province of Vilna. And they came and settled in this town of New Bedford. And Silverblatt came here. He had children. Two of his children remained in the city here. They married and stayed in here. in the city of New Bedford. After he left and went to other communities, he was succeeded by Rabbi Hyman Papkin, P-A-P-K-I-N. Sometimes it's spelled Popkin, like in Jewish, P-O-P-K-I-N. And he came in 1900 or so and was here to his death in 1960.
There were actually 3 synagogues at the time. There was the Ahavath Achim Synagogue on Howland Street. On South Street, there was a smaller Orthodox synagogue. And in the North End, they had their own Orthodox synagogue. And Rabbi Papkin was the rabbi of the whole city. And he would walk some days from the South End to the North End to deliver a sermon. And his sermons, he was such an orator that as he was talking, I don't remember the subjects at the time, he had the men and the women crying.
Eventually, the synagogue outgrew itself because for many years in those days, they would rent out the Montpelier Hall, in the South End, the Montpelier Hall. It's near Cove Road there. That was a club, and they used to rent out space there. They rent out the club for the high holidays to receive the overflow crowd. They'll bring another rabbi and a cantor, conduct services there, and people would go there who couldn't, with enough space. And that's the reason they were looking for larger quarters. The synagogue outgrew its space on Howland Street.
On 1921, there was a group of men who were interested in having another synagogue which would not be as strict as the Orthodox synagogue. And they met in the YMHA or YWHA, and they proposed to have another synagogue built. And that was called Tiferes Israel. And that was located on 6th Street and Madison. And that synagogue became official on September 14, 1924.
Services were held in this building until the congregation relocated to Brownell Avenue in the West End of New Bedford in 1966.
Well, they once had an organ. I think they have guitar playing now. They do have music on the Shabbat and holy days. They use a microphone during the services. We have to speak to them more directly, but I know they have family seating. That was the major change back in the 1920s when the Reform movement started, and they do have family seating, which the Orthodox resisted, but they went along with family seating, the Reform community and the conservative Jewish community.
The Cornelius Grinnell Jr. estate on the corner of Hawthorne and County Streets was purchased.
It purchased the property in 1939, and then over a period of 2 years, it was remodeled by the Feingold brothers, David and Philip Feingold, carpenters, into a functioning synagogue.
In September 1941, Rosh Hashanah, the synagogue opened with a seating capacity of 550.
They always make a procession, because they carry the Torah scrolls from one synagogue to the next synagogue, and they bring them in here. So it's always a procession. I assume that'd be something like that as well for that.
The new synagogue is comprised of 3 different areas: the chapel, social hall, and main sanctuary.
The building we're in now is called the Dr. Eli Nikimo building. Dr. Nikimo was the long-serving president of the Ahavath Achim Synagogue and also a well-respected physician in the city of New Bedford for many years, I think 50 plus years. He was the medical director of the Francis Memorial Hospital in the south of the center of the city for many years. And he was a great physician and a great humanitarian and a very knowledgeable person in Judaism. He had studied both in Europe and the United States in Jewish schools, and he was very knowledgeable and, of course, a very tremendous person. And this building was named in his honor, in Dr. Eli Nikimo building.
In addition to the offices and school, the building also houses the Sid Wainer Chapel. In
the Sidney Wainer Bet Midrash, or Sidney Wainer Chapel, after Sid Wainer, who owned Sid Wainer and Son, now owned by his son Henry, after he passed away, the family had to do something to memorialize his name. The Wainer family goes back a number of generations with the Ahavath Achim Synagogue, and this was an older chapel, and we decided to expand this. This was a project. Made it a third bigger, and gutted the thing, brought these chairs in from Israel, from a kibbutz, Lavi, L-A-V-I, that specialized in synagogue furniture. And then people, bought a chair, memory and honor of somebody. Wainer family paid for the remodeling and reconstruction, and was rededicated, and there's the plaque on the wall.
The chapel was during, they had service every day, every morning and every night, Saturdays, instead of using the big synagogue because the attendance was smaller. Instead of using the big area, we always used the small chapel.
In Jewish law, going back to the days of the temple in Jerusalem, the second temple destroyed over 2,000 years ago in the year 70 of the Common Era, when they had services, it was separate sections for men and for women. The purpose was to have total concentration. One comes to pray to God, one comes as an individual to pray to God. They're called in Hebrew mechitza. This is the Ark, which contained the scrolls of the Old Testament, the 5 books of Moses, written in handwritten scribe on parchment, which every Saturday, Monday, Thursdays, and Saturday, and all Jewish holy days, we take out the scroll and read it in the synagogue during the service. Read a section of the scroll every Saturday, so therefore by the end of the year, we finished the 5 books of Moses, from Genesis through Deuteronomy. And there's the ark that houses the scrolls. As you see, the ark faces east. We pray facing east toward Jerusalem, the ancient capital and the current capital of the state of Israel. There's the table we pray from. The cantor stands by this table. He leads the service facing the ark. The end of the service, the people turn around and face the congregation, but the 97% of the service is done facing the ark. When the Torah scroll is brought out, it's placed in the table. They read from the Torah scroll on the table here, and also the cantor leads the service from the table. So it's the prayer table. It's called the prayer table, and that's where the service is being held from. And the people sit in the pews and participate in the service. Towards the end of the service, when we sing some communal songs, the cantor will turn around and face the congregation. Or they bring their children up to sing those songs and they face the congregation. But we don't turn our back on the ark, and therefore we face the services held facing the ark. As I said, 97% of the service. That is the 10 Commandments carved in it correctly, and that's the eternal light that's on. That's put, but different designs on the ark. So this design happens to the 10 Commandments, but you have different designs, and that's the eternal light of the Jewish people, and that is what's there here. That is the menorah, the candelabra for recently completed holiday of Hanukkah. As you know, the story of Hanukkah revolves on the Maccabees, the band of Jews that defeated the Syrian Greeks, and after defeating them in the military battle, they came back to the temple in Jerusalem, which had not been physically destroyed, had been defiled, but not been physically destroyed. And every day in the temple, this candelabra was lit. And they tried to, once again, light the candelabra, but all they found was one small jar of olive oil, which have lasted one day, miraculously lasted 7 additional days until new olive oil was processed and sent to Jerusalem. For that reason, we light this candelabra. Each day we add another candle or oil, whichever one people use, until we're at the maximum of 8. And we have the top one, number 9, which is elevated because the candelabra cannot be used for personal use for reading or something like that, or doing work by it. It was simply to put and to enjoy the lights and let the people see the miracle, because the miracle of Hanukkah is a miracle for religious freedom. People can live their religious life the way they want to. No one can persecute them or tell them how to live their religious life. So therefore, in the ancient times, before indoor lighting and the modern society, you want to do reading or do work, you put additional light above it, and therefore that was the light you used to read or do other work during the holiday of when the candles are lit. This is the Krivoff, K-R-I-V-O-F-F social hall. It was donated many years ago by the Hyman Krivoff, a member of his parents. And yes, we have all our social functions, our parties, get-togethers, and all those functions here are held in this social hall. Receptions, parties, anything of social nature, this was held over many years. This was built, I think, in the 1950s. The Sidney Wayne Chapel, that building, Dr. Eli Nakima building, was built in the 1960s. These were additions to the main sanctuary, the main building of the, which was the mansion. We're in the main sanctuary of the Ahavath Achim Synagogue. This was the original mansion, Captain Cornelius Grinnell. The Ahavath Achim Synagogue served New Bedford for 120 years. From the documents that I've discovered, we had a variety of rabbis who served here. In '52, they brought the first English-speaking rabbi to this synagogue. This is very late in the transition period. Many immigrants who came here, their primary language was Yiddish, Jewish, that they spoke in where they came from in Europe. They said English, but they spoke Yiddish amongst themselves. And the rabbi, of course, spoke Yiddish to them. By the 20s, 30s, many synagogues were transitioning to American-educated rabbis, or rabbis who spoke English more fully because of the younger generation. Ahavath Achim did not transition to 1952. I don't know why, but they didn't transition to 1952 when they brought in the Rabbi Zalman Schachter, who's the first English-speaking rabbi to come to the Ahavath Achim Synagogue. In Europe, the tradition was every town had one rabbi. You may have had multiple synagogues, depending on the size of the town, but you had one rabbi. In Jewish, known as a shtatrov, the town rabbi. It's changed in America. Every synagogue has its own rabbi. But when they first came here, the Jews, they wanted to replicate the life that existed in the shtetl that they came from. One of the concepts was the town rabbi. This is facing west. Apparently, when this was already an existing building, my conjecture is that when we married into a synagogue, they could not build it facing that way for some structural reasons, and it's facing this way. That Jewish law does give the option. If you can't build it facing east, you're building facing another direction, but then you face toward the ark. You don't turn your back toward the ark and face east. So you still face the ark, even if the ark is not facing east. But this would happen at this synagogue, this building, and this happens in other synagogues as well. And sometimes you cannot build it facing east. And I guess this was an existing building, couldn't do it, and it's facing west. Everybody faces west, faces the ark. You don't turn your back on the ark, you don't turn your back on the Torah scrolls. The cantor will be over here. There's again, once in the prayer table. There's the cantor stays over here. I preach from down here on this table and this lectern over here. I used to speak from the platform, and then I brought the lectern down there and get a little closer to the people to speak to them. Take the Torah scroll out, place on the table to read from the Torah scroll on the Sabbath and Jewish holidays. When we have services here for the larger crowd. You see, these are the candelabras that we have here that decorate the synagogue, the flags of the United States and the state of Israel. And the back walls, you see and the side walls, see the memorial plaques of people who are deceased, who purchased a plaque in memory of their loved one. And the day of the Hebrew day was called the Yortzeit, day of the death of the individual. These plaques are lit up, and they remain lit for the 24-hour period. The chandeliers here, one was an original chandelier from the Grinnell Mansion, and the other one was a Pierpoint chandelier from the famous glass factory, the Pierpoint Glass Factory, that the synagogue purchased back in the 1930s and brought it from the old synagogue on Holland Street to this new location in September 1941. This is an old style partition. The newer styles we saw in the chapel, in the Sidwayna Bet Midrash, Sidwayna Chapel. And today they make nicer ones, more egalitarian looking, but this is an older style, and everything costs money. You couldn't keep on changing the partitions all the time. So we maintained the one that we had that was here for many, many years. I mentioned prayer it's not an easy concept to fathom. Of course, we live in a modern society which looks at things differently, but it's something to think about. And the concept of prayer, individual talking to God. Not as a human family, not as an individual coming to petition, to communicate with God. Individual stands alone before God. A stained glass window broke. And Alvin Glazer, should rest in peace, of Glazer Glass, we went to him and he said he will take care of it. He researched how to redo it, and he had it up for our 100th anniversary that year. And he dedicated in memory of his parents and in honor of the 100th anniversary of the Ahavath Achim Synagogue. And he told me, Alvin, for weeks, months after, he would drive by the synagogue on his way to the office to see that window. The work, beautiful job he did, and you see up there the stained glass window. Jewish Sabbath is one sentence is to differentiate that day, that 24-hour period, from the rest of the week. So it's not, we say restrictions, we don't do things on that day to try to communicate better with God. Be it we don't do commerce, we don't do business, we don't travel, we come to synagogue, we pray a little bit longer, we get together with the family, Shabbat dinner, talk to each other, study more, relax more, try to elevate ourselves spiritually and intellectually to come closer to developing with God. And that's the Shabbat in a nutshell. More and more people now are trying to understand this and try to recreate the Shabbat, even if they didn't do it for many years. But they see the necessity of taking time out from the hustle and bustle of the week, sit down, pause, turn the iPads off, turn the electronics off, turn the TV off, sit down, talk with your family, talk to your children, have a Shabbat dinner, go to the synagogue, talk about the world, talk about life, talk about politics, communicate to God through prayer, study more, relax more, and it's a time when it becomes a spiritual oasis in our hustle and bustle life we live in today. The Ahavath Achim serves the community with great love and great dignity for 120 years. And it's unfortunately financial reasons and constraints, it had to close its doors. But people still want to function, so we still function, but we can't function.
I feel a loss. There's a loss, yes, in my life. If they sell it, one thing I am very interested in is the carrying on of the name Ahavath Achim.
Wonderful, wonderful thing. Synagogue in 120 years, with a very small budget and not a large membership, with a core of activist people, did a lot for the Jewish community of Bedford. And for this, it should always be remembered for what it did for the community of Bedford, for the Jewish and for the general community.